do this with technology. And as a word of warning, I live in a neighborhood with many small children who were a few minutes ago playing a very noisy game. So if there's background noise, I'm not sure I'll be able to prevent it. So I'm very excited tonight to talk to you about the Memorial Tattoos project that I'm presenting alone, but I certainly didn't do alone. So I'm going to do a bit of a grief overview because I never miss a chance to talk about grief when I can, and a little bit of background and the research procedures. Talk about the who, what, where, and why of the tattoos, as well as what we're doing next, and then take your questions. So grief, almost everyone has heard of the 5 stages of grief, and I am not a fan of the 5 stages of grief. There's nothing linear. There's a lot of research that says that the 5 stages, while they might be helpful for people who are grieving as signposts, they were developed for people who are dying, not people who are grieving, and they've taken on a life of their own and gone beyond what they were ever intended to do. One of my lifelong goals is to get the longest hashtag ever going, which is no more 5 stages of grief, but it's very long, and it's probably not going to take off. So just as an example, ways of understanding grief, this is what's called the 2-track model, and what I particularly like about this model is the time, days, weeks, months, years, because grief lasts. Grief does not end. Grief changes, but we live with grief for a very long time, and for some of us forever. And so, and this model says that it affects us both, physically as well as relationally. And another model, this one is, I refer to this as the oscillation model. So basically it's about how we turn towards life, we turn towards grief, and we go back and forth, and we oscillate between those sort of orientations. I really like this model because it's not simple, it's not staged, it's very complex, and grief is complex. Grief is very complicated. It's complicated for each one of us, though it is not necessarily complicated grief, which is a whole thing in and of itself. My favorite notion about grief is that we form new bonds with people. When someone dies, we don't end the relationship. We have a new relationship. We form a new relationship with them. And so this slide is saying, yes, this is normal. This is a person talking to a photograph, or a painting, a portrait of someone, and that's just one way of demonstrating that we have ongoing bonds with people. So I really like this. Grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity, and it is the price you pay for love. And the only cure for grief is to grieve. So in terms of memorial tattoos, in the project we defined a memorial tattoo as a tattoo that was that someone got to honor someone who had died. And when we were doing the research, we wanted to investigate the meaning by documenting the tattoos and documenting the stories. And we limited to, in this particular project, tattoos that memorialize people. There are lots of people who have tattoos for animals, pets, and for lots of other reasons. But in this particular project, we just limited to those tattoos that memorialized a person who had died. So I said earlier, I didn't do this work alone. I started it very early on with Melissa Reed-Lambert, who is a local social worker and private practitioner here in Kitchener, and Mary Ellen McDonald, Deborah Davidson, Marcella Gorman, and Melanie Balchko. So if you look at where they're from sociology and dentistry, although Mary Ellen is an anthropologist, and the Department of English and the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science. So we had this really great interdisciplinary team to think about this. So it was really a team undertaking. And just, I want to start we had both internal funding from the University of Waterloo and from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, but we particularly always want to thank our participants. And I want to note here that all of the photos and any of the quotes that you're going to hear are used with permission. Everybody signed forms. Everybody had choices about being recorded, having audio recordings of their interviews, and about being photographed. And so everything that I'm sharing with you, we have permission to share. We did a narrative inquiry. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. The research is, the methods is not what you're here necessarily to hear about. And we used, for example, that notion of continuing bonds. So those ongoing relationships. That was part of one of the lenses that we used in interpretation. So who gets memorial tattoos? I forgot to make my confession at the beginning. I do not have any tattoos, and I have some family members who have some very funny ideas. Some of them rather negative about tattoos, and so one of the questions that a family member put to me was, well, who is it that gets these tattoos? And they must all be young people. And I thought, you know what, I don't think that's accurate. And I hadn't actually sort of sat back and looked at the ages, but that question from that family member really caused me to do that. And just, I always like to say that one of the team members who has lots of tattoos, she always says, when I say I don't have any tattoos, she always adds, yet. So there's always the possibility. So even despite the negative the impressions in my family anyway, but so in terms of the who generally, we interviewed 42 people with tattoos, and those 42 people were, that was done in 39 interviews, because we had 3 couples who were interviewed together, and we had one person who was interviewed twice because he got a second tattoo and he asked to come back and be interviewed again. We had 9 men, 31 women, and 2 gender-free, genderqueer folk. And their relationships to the people who died were the gamut of human relationships. We had partners, we had parents of young children, older children, stillborn babes. We had children and grandchildren of adults who had died. We had siblings, and we had friends. We had like every human relationship that I can think of. So in particular relation to the ages of people who participated. They were not all young. Well, it depends on how you define young. Being in my 50s, I still think that's young, but not many people do. But there were equal numbers of folks in their 20s as folks in their 50s. And our oldest participant got his first tattoo when he was in his 70s, and he was in his 80s when we interviewed him. So they were not just young people. And certainly, there's a nice distribution of the ages. And I wanted to note as well that many people had more than one tattoo, more than one memorial tattoo, and some had tattoos for other reasons, and some people only had one tattoo. So we had a whole gamut of that kind of aspect as well. So what do they get? What do memorial tattoos look like? So I've organized them a little bit into some categories. So the first category is flowers and plants. This tattoo is obviously a rose. It's a very vivid rose, and this young woman got this tattoo to honor her father because he used to bring roses to her and her mother. So she felt that was the most appropriate way to honor him. She remarked that him bringing roses was a really lovely gesture, so she thought it was appropriate to carry it with her a little bit. To paraphrase a quote from her interview. This tattoo is interesting as well because she sought out a very famous tattoo artist and made an appointment and months if not years ahead and traveled a distance to the tattoo artist. Who does the tattoo is a very important part of it, but to my knowledge this is the only one with a famous tattoo artist. But continuing with the flowers and plants, this woman, this is her first tattoo, not her last, and this one also honors her father, and they used to garden together, and so she thought that tomato plant was a fitting way to honor her relationship with her father and their gardening together. I think I was a member of her family that designed the tomato plant, and then the tattoo artist put the sort of diamonds behind it to make it stand out. One of the things that I found really striking throughout this research is the role that tattoo artists have in making the tattoos successful, I guess, but in the sense that they're beautiful and they really they stand out, even something that's black and white and isn't necessarily colorful. It makes it stand out in a striking way. This tattoo is on the back of her calf, and it's an oak leaf, and contains the word for strength in Dutch, which this family often said to one another. And so this person's brother had died, so the oak leaf honors her brother, but also the family and then the family tradition of saying this word to one another. So memorial tattoos often you know, they honor someone who died, but they also often honor others, and, you know, and have connections to others, and in this case, it's honoring this family tradition of using this word. So another category is creatures. This is a dragonfly, and this is this person's second memorial tattoo. And the dragonfly for him symbolized transformation and grief, as he had understood that dragonflies bring angels on their wings. And so the dragonfly is holding a halo, and the date that is underneath the dragonfly's wings is the date of his wife's death. And her initials are in the wings of the dragonfly. And further in creatures, this young woman had always wanted a tattoo, and one of her friends died, and as her friend was dying, she knew that she was going to get a purple frog because her friend loved frogs. And it's interesting to have the frog have wings. There's often they're creatures because they're not always perfectly accurate creatures. I'm not aware of a lot of frogs with wings, though they might exist because nature is wonderful. This is another tattoo. This is a peony, and this peony honors this woman's grandparents, but it also connects both the living and those who have died. So the butterfly with Angelina underneath is for her daughter, who is alive and well, and is connected to Angelina's great grandparents in this tattoo, because this is the mother's grandparents, and Angelina had never met her great grandfather. So this connects, this honors both someone who has died and connects the living as well. Tattoos also often involve hearts. This heart is also a fingerprint. This young woman's husband died, and he died suddenly of an overdose. One of her children were very young, and she told the story of her youngest touching the tattoo, tapping it, and saying, "You have Daddy's heart." So the tattoo, in that sense, also connects. It connects the living and the dead. And she talked about wearing it proudly, and really honoring that connection with her children in that manner. This heart is a participant who had experienced 2 deaths, an ex-spouse as well as a best friend, both of whom had died by suicide years apart. And this person felt that her grief was dismissed by others and that her losses were disenfranchised. And so this is a heart with wings, and it's broken, and there's a Band-Aid, and there's the word joy. There's a lot in this relatively small tattoo, but there's a lot of seemingly contradictory emotions, but that are all part of this woman's story. This heart is for a sister, and the sister named Holly Jean who died. And this woman remarked that with this tattoo, she felt like her sister was closer to her and that she would never lose her because of having the tattoo. She said that her sister would not fade away because she's still there with this tattoo. And this tattoo is probably the one, when we first started talking about doing this project, I expected more kind of symbolism of death, like crosses or tombs or skulls and things like that, and there are very few. What's remarkable is the stories that go along with the tattoos. A lot of these tattoos, you would not know that they're memorial tattoos unless you ask the question. But this is probably the one that it looks the most like a memorial tattoo. There's also a category of tattoos that are words. And so this one is a quote, a Taylor Swift quote. When I'm teaching, I like to ask, and I'm in the classroom or in a room with people, I like to ask if anybody recognizes the quote. Lots of young people don't like to admit that they are familiar with Taylor Swift. This is a Taylor Swift quote, and you know, it's not cool anymore to be a fan of Taylor Swift, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, you are the best thing that's ever been mine. This young woman used to say that to her friend, and so she decided to get that as a tattoo because it also summed up their relationship. So she's got that on the back of her shoulder, along with her friend's name and dates. This tattoo is part of the Semicolon project, and the Semicolon project is an attempt to fight stigma around mental health. This young woman's sister died by suicide, and so this tattoo both symbolizes her sister, but also reminds her to choose to keep going, to keep it's an effort for her to remind herself that she needs to keep going when she is struggling herself. And she remarked that she had always wanted to be involved in trying to lessen the stigma against suicide because it's a scary topic. And that's one of the really extraordinary things that we really enjoyed in this research as well, is the ways that people use their tattoos to engage and talk to others and to fight stigma, to challenge the stigma of having a tattoo, to challenge the stigma of grief, because grief is stigmatized, but also to challenge stigma around certain kinds of death, like suicide and overdose. And so there are a lot of people who were, talked about their tattoos in a way of advocating and lessening stigma. This tattoo, I think, is probably the only tattoo that was on the front of someone's shins. It's, one side says all saints have a past, and the other side says all sinners have a future. This tattoo memorializes a friend who had died by suicide, and is placed on the front of his legs, their legs, so that that it's a relatively public area, and people see it, and you know, people ask questions, and so it's to engage in to engage in dialogue about tattoos, about stigma, about mental health, about suicide, etc., etc. So another one, nevertheless she persisted, is a quote that got very used in the Me Too movement, but this woman saw it as part of her grief journey, and so she had that as a memorial tattoo to her husband. This is actually the same woman as the earlier fingerprint heart. So this was her other memorial tattoo. These words are, this is two arms, a husband and wife whose adult son died, and they and their son had written focus, love, appreciate, and so you can see that they both have focus, love, appreciate in his handwriting on their arms, and they had many memorial tattoos, but they were for the son and a grandson who had died. And they too engaged in talking to others about suicide prevention, and used their tattoos to engage in conversations and to challenge stigma. So there's also tattoos that, they're all personal, but there's tattoos that are very personalized. This mother's daughter died of cancer before the age of 3, and she, in having cancer treatments, would be given bravery beads at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. So the mother took the bravery beads to the tattoo artist who designed this incredibly beautiful tattoo. And you can see it's in a relatively private place. You know, this is not somewhere that is very public, and yet it's, you know, she knows it's there, and you know, in her own way, she's also even advocating, you know, for challenging stigma. And in this one there's also the connection between the living and the dead. The top heart is her daughter Avery, who died, and the other 2 hearts are her other 2 children. And the purple butterfly bead is the bravery bead that indicates that a child is near the end of life. So the beads have significance, and the tattoo artist did a fantastic job making that into a really, really beautiful, very, very personal tattoo. These tattoos are on a couple whose child was born still. The father has, the one on the left is the father, and he has the child's initials and the date of his birth and death. Mother got hers a number of years later, and at that point she had 2 other children. So the 2 hearts outside of sort of the figure of the mother are the 2 other children, and her heart, and the baby who died heart. You know, they're all, again, it's the connection with the living and the dead, and the stylized stylized image of the baby. She described it as a mother image with the forever baby, and why he's still on the inside. This tattoo is also very personal. It's the tree of life, because this person has always loved trees, and it's honoring her son, he died by suicide, and she really felt that it was important to have something to be able to look at and to touch and to see, to remind herself that her son is with her all the time. The next tattoo is also very personalized, and this particular person had two tattoos, one to honor his father, and this particular one honors his brother, and his brother loved baseball. So this is a symbolic baseball crescent moon, which symbolizes a new beginning, and is also a stylized baseball. And these ones are, you know, this man had both of his tattoos on his forearms, but in places that could be hidden, but weren't necessarily hidden. And this tattoo is also very personal and personalized, in that this is a father whose son also died by suicide, and this is over his heart, and he knew he wanted to get a tattoo. He didn't know what to get, and this image came to him in a dream. The tattoo artist, I think, modified it slightly by adding a few more sort of wisps of smoke, but it symbolizes the son as a little boy and the young man that he had become, but his future is snuffed out. And for the father, he loved his son, but he said I didn't have the relationship that we wanted. So this is the physical embodiment of the father's feelings about his son. So where do they get them? Everybody put a great deal of thought into where they went on their body, and about the more visible places and the less visible places that encouraged conversation. These are very crude drawings of placement of tattoos. So you can see that there's more commonalities. There's more, you know, shoulders and you know, front and back shoulders and forearms. There's lots of places where there are no tattoos, so you know, there's some commonalities. But why? Why do people get tattoos? Some folks talked about pain. And linking the physical pain of the tattooing to grief. This is a granddaughter who got her grandmother's signature tattooed on her. She said that allowed her every day to see it. And that would bring a smile to her face instead of feeling the loss and pain of the loss of her grandmother. That particular story was lovely because she and her cousin both got the grandmother's signature. The grandmother was ambidextrous, and so they each got it on either side, one on the right shoulder, this one on the left shoulder. She also had designed her wedding dress so that this was visible, so that her grandmother was at her wedding with her. This husband this gentleman actually got this tattoo before his wife died of cancer, And she was going through treatments, and he designed this and had it made into a necklace for her to wear, and he got the tattoo. And her comment was that he wanted it to hurt more. It doesn't matter how much it hurt, it's nothing compared to what she was going through. So he welcomed the pain. This mother commented that it felt good to have physical pain instead of the constant emotional pain that she felt. She said that getting a tattoo was a pain with meaning, because the pain that she felt from losing her son was useless. It didn't help, it didn't bring him back, it didn't make her feel better, it did nothing, and that she was in agony. And she got this incredibly beautiful tattoo with a little tiny date in the corner and a background of a puzzle piece because there's something missing in her life. It's a very personal tattoo, and it's absolutely spectacular. This is perhaps my favorite tattoo, and all the ones I shouldn't pick favorites, but as you can see, this is a very large piece. This is actually the husband of the woman whose tattoo, the woman whose tattoo you just saw. These two are the couple of the son who died. And the son loved rock climbing, so this is rock climbing implements designed into a tattoo. Again, a very personal tattoo with the son's dates on the climbing equipment, but very, very subtle. You could very easily miss those dates and not know that this was a memorial tattoo. But this man commented that he had an extremely high pain threshold. Because this would, this is a very big piece, and there was a lot of there was a lot of tattooing that went into this. He commented that he loves the feel of it, the burn, just because it's like that, and there's a connection in that pain. This next tattoo is a first tattoo for Riley. This is a relatively small tattoo on a shoulder, and this mother, excuse me, commented that she was scared of the pain and she wasn't sure how she would do with a tattoo, so she got a very small one, and with the infinity symbol, because love never dies, that incorporates her name, and then she started thinking about a different tattoo, and she went and got this next tattoo on her other shoulder, which is a cherry blossom, because she said that they are vibrant and they only bloom for a very short time, but when they do, they're full of life and wonderful. And that was what her daughter was like. She wasn't here for very long, but when she was here, she was vibrant and beautiful and full of life. And she also commented that the cherry blossom was, when she saw the tattoo, was much, much bigger than she expected it to be. And that at first she was a bit dismayed at the size, and that she's come to love it. And this next tattoo is also a fingerprint tattoo. This woman's mother died suddenly and unexpectedly, and this woman thought she had many, many tattoos. She thought she had finished getting tattoos, and then her mother died, and she knew she wanted one more. And she got this, she got her mother's fingerprint, and the tattoo artist lifted the love mom out of a card that her mother had written, and it's on the inside of her forearm, facing in her direction. It's her tattoo. It is, oriented for her, and she was very thoughtful about that. She commented, and again, she had many tattoos before this one. She said the pain of being tattooed was kind of refreshing, that it was nice to feel a physical pain that's different from the ache that she felt. She felt like her heart, when her mother died, that her heart was being ripped out and stomped on, and so getting the tattoo was kind of cathartic. This tattoo, which is the last one that I'm going to show you, is a wife whose husband died, and her pain was very emotional. She would get very angry, and she initially regretted getting the tattoo because seeing it reminded her of her husband, and her husband had died suddenly of a death that could have been prevented, and she was really conflicted around that, and then at first having the tattoo kind of reminded her of that, and sort of caused the pain, but she came to love the tattoo. She is of a Sikh background where tattoos are generally not well regarded, but her parents became very supportive of it. She also had young children, and she said, I want this to be a good thing. I want when the children to look at it to know that daddy is always with mommy a little bit. So again, that connection of the living and the dead. So just what I think is really, really striking about all of the tattoos, I was saying earlier, that they don't necessarily look memorial, but they're a celebration of the person, they're a celebration of that person's life, they're a celebration of the relationship with the person, and they tell stories. The images tell stories, there are stories that go along with them, and all of that is about connection, and all of it embodies connection. And many people also embodied the connection because they touched their tattoos when they talked about them. There was a physicality about how they, the choices that they made about where it was placed, what side of the body was on. There's a lot of left side tattoos that are near the heart, and others that are near the womb for some of the mothers and things like that. And they really do embody the connection, and they all ink the bond. So that's that notion of continuing bond. They really do. It's really inking it. And so just in terms of what we are doing, we have published one article in a journal called Death Studies, and I'd be happy to share a copy with anybody who would be interested in reading it. Memorial Tattoos, Advancing Continuing Bonds Theory. So again, it's that notion that tattoos are a way of embodying the bonds, but also we touch on how people are challenging stigma. Carly Greco is one of the authors on this paper. She was a student who worked on the project and came up with part of the analysis. And so she wasn't on the original team, but participated in publishing the article. And we very, very recently just got awarded a second grant for a larger project called Healing Tattoos. So we'll be sort of enlarging the umbrella and looking at tattoos that heal, and not just memorialize, but also heal. So the umbrella will include memorial tattoos, but won't be exclusive to memorial tattoos. And so we have websites and we have an Instagram and Twitter. I think there's the Instagram and Twitter, Inking the Bond. We have a website, yeah, and I would be happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
If anyone has questions, you can unmute yourself and talk.
Hi, Susan. I'll be the first one. I'm sure someone needs to be the first one, right? But maybe I missed this at the beginning. I joined I joined in and out for a moment there, but how did you become interested in what started all of this for you?
I didn't actually talk about that. So years ago, I was co-facilitating a grief group in the community with Bereaved Families of Ontario, and started noticing people with tattoos who would say things like, I never thought I was going to get a tattoo, but it just seemed the right thing to do. And just like things like that. And I was kind of intrigued, and then talked to a few folks, and then talked to Melissa, and yeah, and then we just started doing it. And we thought, oh, we'll interview a few people. We'll see, we'll just kind of start small and see what happens. We thought maybe we'd interview 10 or 15 people, and we put the ask out, and we had 60 people volunteer, 60 people volunteer. Like, people wanted to tell their stories. So we were like, okay, we're on to something. It was really great. So we tried to, and we had people we thought we'd just do it locally. We had people all over the country volunteering. So we didn't do all the interviewing that we wanted to, but yeah, we had a really great response.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing the work. It's really fascinating.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, so I'm gonna take that as a no, but if you have any questions, please make sure to put in the chat before we end.
And well, just I want to, I did we have our Inking the Bond Instagram, but I want to do a little shout out. If those of you on Instagram haven't seen, there's an Instagram account called Tattoos of Toronto, which is the passion project of Ziba, who's one of the people on the call, and it's awesome. And it's basically, they're not all memorial tattoos, but they're tattoos and their stories, and it's a really great account. It's really wonderful to hear people's stories.
All right. Okay, so we have one question.
Yeah.
So it says, great presentation. I was interested in the gentleman who was asked to be interviewed twice. Do you think that participating in this project was in and of itself helpful for the grief?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is a very good question. I haven't thought about it. I mean, I think I think people telling their stories is always beneficial. So yes, was it necessarily beneficial for his grief? And what was interesting too is that his tattoos were really different, and he had actually talked to us in the first one, about planning the second one, and so then came back and told us about the second one. So that was neat for us in terms of sort of hearing about the planning and then hearing about how, it changed. Because, the tattoo artists have a bit of a role in, what things end up looking like and what's going to work and what's not going to work. So, yeah, I don't know if it was helpful for his grief, but he certainly enjoyed it. So that can't be bad.
Does anyone else have any questions?
And Ziva's put up the Tattoos of Toronto on Instagram in the message if anybody wants to have a look at that.
So I would like to thank you, Susan, for the fascinating talk tonight. I certainly learned a lot about memorial tattoos and who gets it and why and how it all connects to grief. Thank you so much for sharing so many beautiful pictures and stories. I was very, very touched, as I'm sure it's a lot of the audiences. I want to let you know that we all appreciate the work you do, and I thank you again for sharing some of that work tonight. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave it before you leave, and have a very good evening.
Thank you for being here, everyone.